Hello, and welcome to the BOFIN Buzz, the podcast for anyone fascinated by farming's future. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to BOFIN Buzz, on to episode 7 already. And this is a very special episode because on Tuesday, 5th of December, it was World Soil Day. And as everyone knows, there is so much more interest now in the soils, which is fantastic to see. And there are few people with greater interest than our very special guest today, Tim Parton. So welcome, Tim. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Tom. Thanks for inviting me to come and speak.
Not at all. Well, I'm really looking forward to this, Tim, because we've got a lot to talk about. And I know, through the work that you've done, I've seen you present on several times. I haven't yet been to your farm. But that's something I'd very much like to do at some point. But I've seen you present on several occasions, webinars and events and things like that, and also on Twitter and so on. And you make some quite bold claims about your farming system, and that's something that I really like to explore today. But first of all, before we start, can I just ask you? If there were 3 key things that have helped you get your farming system to where it is today, what do you think they'd be?
They would have to be, Tom, biology, and biology, because it is the life in that soil that gets me where they're my underground workers and they are working for me 24/7. All they want is the right environment with the right amount of food. And that is my job as a farmer, to provide that environment. And as long as I do that, my soils keep improving. They could easily go back if we get the wrong weather, but keeping that underground livestock working is the key to everything I do here.
Right. Well, I'm not surprised you say that, actually, because that very much reflects, everything I've heard about you, Tim. So let's explore those areas in some detail. But first of all, can I just ask you for a bit of background? So you're manager of Brood Farm, is that correct?
Yeah, it's Brood Park Farm. We're in South Staffordshire, just north of Wolverhampton. So we're a 300 hectare farm.
Fantastic. And just to describe the farm for us. So, what sort of enterprises have you got there?
So I class us as an arable farm. I grow winter wheats, milling and biscuit wheats. I grow winter oilseed rape. Every field on the farm will have a cover crop on it within a 12-month period, because that is the heart of my operation, getting all that carbon back into the ground and never leaving soil bare, and feeding all that underground livestock. And then from there, I grow spring malting barley, spring beans, spring lupins, spring oats sometimes. I grow wildflowers for seed, as in cornflowers, corn marigolds and chamomile. And then I also have grass in the rotation, which is on a 3 or 4 year lay, which is rotated around the farm because we are close to Wolverhampton. So we've got a brilliant equine market all around us. And grass is a brilliant carbon sequestrator. So it's just great to have that in the rotation.
I see. So how long have you been at Brood Park Farm then?
I've been here most of my life, because it's quite a unique situation, as my father was farm manager before me. So it just happened that I took over from him. It was never planned. It just happened. So I've been here since the age of 12.
Right. So you've always had farming in the blood, kind of thing?
It's all I've ever wanted to do. I was told from when I could walk was to farm. It's wherever my father was, I wasn't far behind him.
Right, absolutely, fantastic. Well, I wanted to look at that first. It's World Soil Day, or was on Tuesday. So let's look in detail at some of that. And you may know, and well, in fact, I know that you know that we have been involved in a project with the Crop Science Centre, our Soil Fungal Communities project, this is all about arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. And this is something that I know that you know a lot about, Tim. And I know that there are a few other farmers as well who are very much involved in looking at their AMF in their soil. So we did this project with Crop Science Centre. This is Dr. Tom Thurkel. And if you want to know more about this, by the way, it's a previous episode of the BOFIN Buzz where we talked to Tom about some of the results that came out of it. But the idea of this was we asked farmers to sample their soil, send in root samples, and from that root sample, you can actually tell how much arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi is in the soil. And we had a really, really fascinating insight into this. We had 41 samples returned. I think you asked for a sample pack, Tim, and then never sent us a sample, which was really regrettable.
You're going to embarrass me now, Tom.
But I mean, this is something. So, just to tell me first of all, I know that you've looked into the AMF in your soil. Tell me, what's your experience of AMF? Why is it important?
You've got to remember, Tom, that it's fungi that created the planet in which we live. I think the oldest fossil of the fungi is about 1 billion years old. And that system worked for millions of years. It's only human beings that decided we'd got a better system. And you've always got to bear that in mind, that the whole system worked far better before human beings got involved, in my opinion. A lot of my soils now, I'm 2-to-1 fungi to bacteria ratio, which is getting a bit high, but it's not something I've got masses of control over. But it's not to the detriment of my cropping at the moment, right. So I'm quite happy to go with that. And fungi just provides everything that plant needs. Once we get that connection, as long as I can feed the fungi, the fungi will deliver to the plant. It's when I haven't got enough food there for the fungi that we might start to get problems with too high a fungi ratio. And we might look to have to reduce it because the fungi will then start to rob the plant of nutrients because it hasn't got enough food within the soil to feed it. But as long as I'm providing that food, as in with my cover crops and always getting those exudates down there, there's plenty of food and the fungi does the job for me and provides all those free nutrients. Well, I call them free. They're not really free because I'm working all the while to provide that fungi with the right food. But once you get that fungi working, everything becomes available. That's when all the natural goodies come along and that plant can be nutrient rich with all that nutrition ready to feed us. And that's what I'm all about, is providing a nutrient rich end product for the end consumer, because that's where we're going to get all the health benefits and really make the difference to that consumer.
Well, that's really interesting, Tim. Let's drill down into that a bit. First of all, I just want to take a look at the results that we got from this. And what was really great about this is we had a really nice spread of farmers from right across the country, some in Scotland as well, and also a spread of farming systems as well. So we asked people to say whether they were organic or regenerative farmers or conventional. Most of our farmers were regenerative, but we had a really nice spread of farmers, nice spread of soil types as well. The interesting thing is we had a massive range. And Tom Thurkel, our scientist, was very surprised by this, that it ranged right from 5% up to about 70% of root colonization is what we were measuring by AMF, which, I mean, that's a staggering range. I would suspect him, although you didn't send us a sample, but I would suspect you're somewhere in the upper part of that range. Have you had an analysis done of your roots?
I've tested before under the microscope, and I'm normally around that 60-70 when I've done it myself. I haven't had it independently, but I've done it myself. And I'd expect to be up there because I haven't moved the soil here now for 15 years. Fungi is very delicate. It doesn't like disturbance. And the other thing is, if you're going to do a tillage, you're burning off all that carbon, potential food, and it's just not going to work. You're interfering with that whole environment. I always use the analogy. It's just like somebody putting a ball and chain through your house, as in doing deep tillage. And then just as you start to lay a few bricks to build your house, somebody puts a ball and chain through again. And it just can't get established. And that's where we've all gone wrong, in my opinion. We can't keep having all this soil moved and all that carbon going up to the atmosphere. We've got to start and change our practices. But it's not a competition. I can't stress that enough. Everybody must go at a pace they're comfortable with to start and change their soil, because we always have to keep profit in mind. And there's no point making loads of changes and then the farmer can't sleep at night. That's not going to do anybody any good, and it's not going to do their mental health any good. So it's so important to go at your own pace and do what you're comfortable with. But you don't have to do masses. You can just do little bits if that's what you're comfortable with. You know, there's plenty of people around now with the machinery to be able to do what you want to do. So you haven't got to make that massive investment. If you're a bit cautious about making changes, you can just put a certain area of your farm down and let somebody come in and do the work for you without having a massive cost and massive expenditure. I'm repeating myself there, but you haven't got to take that big risk. That's what I'm trying to make, as in laying out loads and loads of money on new machinery. You can just do a little bit to convince yourself. And once you know it's starting to work and you can see your farm changing, that's the time to invest and take it forward.
I see. So, when did you start at Brew Park Farm? Then, when did you go? Sort of completely direct drilling. Then,
completely direct drilling was 2005. Previous to that, I was strip tilling. So you could argue I've been doing it now for 14, 15 years. It was always a passion of mine. I've always had an interest in soil, and soil, it gives us everything. It gives us food. It cleans out water. It gives us the air we breathe. It's our most valuable resource as a farmer, and it's up to that caretaker of the land to look after it. We can't keep having all this soil going down our waterways every autumn, taking all that nutrition with it. We've got to start and farm in a different way and be responsible for the way we're farming.
So was it the a care for the soils that led you into it then, Tim, or was it the financial aspects of looking to reduce cultivation cost?
It was both, Tom, because profit has always got to be my number one concern. It's not my farm, and if I'm not turning a profit, one, I won't have a job, and two, the farm won't be in business, and that has always got to be everybody's primary concern, because there's always somebody ready to take your farm over and take your business over. And I love all the environmental work that I've done and all the improvements I've made, but if I'm not making money, I can't do any of it. So profit is always the number one, which strip tillage makes perfect sense that I was still doing all that operation, but in one pass. So it saved on the diesel, it saved on time, and it was far better for the soil. And then in 2012, I started to play around with biology more, and that's where I knew I was moving too much soil, and I didn't want to do that operation. And it was far more financially gaining by not moving any soil at all. And that was the next step then that I wanted to do was to direct drill. But that's when I wanted to start and inject biology in that biosphere right next to the seed to start and get that connection, get that symbiosis going between the plant and the biology and get those exudates coming out.
Well, let's drill down into that a little bit further, because this is the area that I really want to explore with you, Tim. So you've really looked in quite a lot of detail at the biology that's going on there. We talked a little bit about the fungal communities, but you also claim that the biology in the soil is helping the plant and helping you reduce the amount of fungicides and other inputs you have to put in to the crop while still retaining productivity. And I really want to drill down into that, Tim, because a lot of people say, oh, that's a load of rubbish. Tim can't be doing that. You can't do it all through biology. So let's just unpack that a little bit and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
The first thing I'd probably say, Tom, how do they know I can't do it? Have they actually tried it? Have they had a go? Because biology can provide an awful lot. And it's very easy, because you can't see it, just to poo-poo it and say, oh, that doesn't work. If you haven't tried it, how the bloody hell do you know? That would be the first one. And two, the one thing I would always, when I did my gap year, the guy I worked for always stated to me, he said, Tim, I never tell a lie, because once you tell a lie, you've got to remember it for the rest of your bloody life. And it's always stuck with me. Just tell the truth, and life's simple. So I'd never, ever, I'm always very conservative with my results, if I'm honest, Tom. I'm always actually under what I actually did, just for that reason, that I never want to be in that situation where I'm chastised or questioned. But biology does, and nitrogen fixing bacteria, it works so well, and we've got so much work to learn to see what it can give us. You know, I've had some fantastic results with nitrogen fixing bacteria, but the one thing I do, is you'll be well aware of, Tom, is I do an awful lot of sap testing. So I'm constantly testing the blood going around that plant, the sap, to see exactly what's happening, because in our maritime climate, and especially with these awful springs that we've had the last 3 or 4 years, biology sometimes stops working. If it gets too dry, biology will stop working because there's no moisture left in the soil. And that's when I have to step in and foliar feed. And I don't think in our climate, unless it's a wonderful year and everything goes right, that I wouldn't be able to do any inputs at all, because our maritime climate just doesn't allow it. So I'm constantly testing every 10 to 14 days to see exactly what's happening within that plant. And then I'll do foliar applications because they're at least 5 times more efficient, if not more. And I'm not getting that runoff. I'm not polluting the planet in which we live, and I'm maximising the product I'm using on that plant to get the best results. I always want to try and get that plant to its peak performance to get those top results, but doing it with the minimum amount of inputs that I can do. And foliar applications give me that option. And if I don't need to put them on, I don't put them on. It's as simple as that. It's just seeing.
When you say foliar applications, what are you talking about there, Tim?
So when a plant is growing, sort of that April, May, June time, I will be testing that plant every 10 to 14 days to see exactly where that nutrition is, because it's all about balance. I don't want nitrogen too high. Nitrogen is our best friend and our worst enemy, all rolled into one. If I get nitrogen high, I'm going to get weak cell walls and I'm going to get disease coming in. It's as simple as that. So I want that balanced, which is why I like to foliar feed, because I can take control of the situation and see exactly where I am. And if my biology is working and there's enough nitrogen there, I'd reduce the amount. I wouldn't do an application at all of nitrogen. It's just seeing where it is. But it's that balance.
Right.
It's using the best of science, which is why I call it intelligent farming. And it's not a big-headed thing at all. It's just about using the best of science to use that intelligence to make an informed decision about what that plant needs, rather than just doing a blanket covering and saying, oh, there's enough there, it'll be fine. Well, yes, there'll be probably enough there, but there's probably more than enough there. And then if we're only using 50% of the nitrogen we're putting on that soil and it's all getting into our waterways, we can't keep having all these high nitrate levels in our water. One, the water companies will start kicking up a fuss, as they already are. But two, it's bad for our health. We know high nitrates in the water are carcinogenic. We can't keep doing that. We've got to start and be responsible. And yes, there'll be people saying, well, it's not just farmers.
Okay.
No, it's not just farmers. But if we get our act in order, at least we can point the finger at somebody else. Well, we've got our act in order. Now it's time to get your house in order.
Okay, well, let's just look at that. So how much nitrogen are you applying? I mean, have you got an idea of, can you relate it to, say, the normal practice, if you like, and let us know, how much you're applying?
There isn't a normal practice. Everybody wants the blueprint, and it doesn't exist because we're dealing with a living entity. And what I did last year, I might do totally different this year. Last year was a really interesting spring in the fact we had that lovely February. March came in, very wet, very cold. I'd done an early application of nitrogen and it had washed away because the plant was too cold. It hadn't used it. So I had to go again because otherwise I wouldn't have got enough foliar there. I didn't have enough nitrogen in the plant and I would have had a big yield. And I did suffer a bit last year because March was so awful. I couldn't get out there to do a foliar application. So I lost a few tillers. It was an awful growing year. But the best I've done is I applied 50 kilos of ammonium sulfate as a soil applied and then about 24 litres of a foliar applied, and that averaged 12 tonnes to the hectare weighed and sold, which is the best I've done, and that's with no fungicides, no insecticides or anything. And that was just
no fungicides, no insecticides.
I haven't used insecticides for 9 years.
Now that really interests me. Yeah. Now, and this is what I want to ask about, because as I understand it, Tim, the fungal burden, if you like, or the pathological fungal burden that we get in the crops is related to how much nitrogen you're throwing at it as well. So just talk us through the balance that you're looking for there. How can you get away with not applying so much fungicide?
I haven't used fungicides for 3 years now, so I don't expect ever to use them again. But I'm not saying I won't, because I've always got to keep my eye on that balance sheet. If I got something wrong, then I'd have to react. But when you're trying to farm this way, by the time you see that you've got it wrong, it's probably too late to apply the fungicide anyway, because the spores are already there and you've just got to let them mature and see what you're left with, which isn't always a disaster. As I've found, sometimes I've had yellow rust come in and I haven't had a yield penalty from it. But it all starts from day one, really, and it's getting the silicon content into the plant. So I'm getting that silicon into the plant and getting that armour on the plant to make that cell wall strong. Also getting some calcium there for the same reason of getting that cell wall strong. That's where I start off. So straight from day one, that plant is protected. It's got its armour on, that it's already a strong, healthy plant. And then from there, silicon and calcium play a big part in my foliar applications, always keeping that cell wall strong. So the spore can't drill in, it can't get into that cell, it just can't penetrate the plant to get established. Then nitrogen is, because if I get the nitrogen too high, I wouldn't be, in my mind, I wouldn't be able to get enough silicon on to keep that cell wall strong. So it's keeping that nitrogen balance that I'm not going to get a yield penalty, but I'm going to get enough to get the top end of that yield margin, what I'm after. So it's balance all the way through, which is why I love the foliar. And it maybe I do a little bit more soil applied if I needed to. It's all on a growing year, Tom. It's not a set stone. I'm actually looking at what's happening and I'll make informed decisions. And I think after last year, I will do a little bit more soil applied if I have a year like that, so as I haven't got that pressure of constantly fighting Mother Nature, because I was just on the back foot. It was so wet, so cold. I couldn't get enough nitrogen into the plant to keep it alive when it was so wet. So I will probably do more soil applied to keep enough nitrogen there, but always with a carbon source when I apply liquid N. So I'll have a carbon source there which will keep that nitrogen where I want it, so as the plant can absorb it, and I'm not going to have it leaching out. And just keeping it balanced. So, you know, I will be foliar feeding this next season just the same as I have. But if I fail to do more soil applied N than 50, it's not set in stone. That's what the point I'm trying to make. Nothing I do is set in stone. Just because I did it last year doesn't mean I'll do the same this year. It's thinking on your feet and being the observer and watching what's happening. And if I need to go with more soil applied, I'll go with more soil applied. It's not a competition to stick your chest out and say, look how well I've done. I haven't put any nitrogen on. Look at what I've got. Well, that might not work every year, and you've got to be able to be prepared to say, well, I'm going to put 100 kilos on this year then if it needs it, because I've had to do it because the situation arose where I couldn't get out and I needed to get N out there. But if I did that, I'd still be sat testing to try and get the potassium up, because I need that potassium up there, because nitrogen will be antagonistic to the potassium. So I need to build my potassium, because that's a big immune defense system within the plant, is having enough potassium there. And that is normally across the board. Potassium is a big part.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you know, we talked quite a bit about, you know, the needless inputs that you're not applying, but one aspect that I'd just like to discuss for a moment is what you are applying. And when we were speaking earlier, and I asked you for the pronunciation of Brew Park Farm, and you said, well, that's because I'm always brewing. So tell me about the brew that you're doing, and you know what you know, how you do it and what you're actually applying.
I first started brewing back in 2012, and then, well, I didn't start brewing then. I first started using biology, and I put some nitrogen fixing bacteria out. I reduced N by 40 kilos to pay for the microbes, and everywhere I'd done it, I'd got an extra ton.
Sorry, Tim, could I just ask, could you explain, when you say brewing, what are you brewing? You know, what is this brew?
Well, say 2012, I just put the raw microbes out. I didn't brew. And then from there, my journey started that if I brew the microbes, it makes it an awful lot cheaper. So most of my biological brews are about £2.50, £3 a hectare. They're very, very cheap, but very, very effective. So if I do a range of different types of applications, so I might brew a consortium of microbes, so I know exactly what I'm brewing. So there'll be nitrogen fixing, phosphorus releasing. There'll be some trichoderma in there as another natural fungicide. The Bacillus subtilis will be in there as a nitrogen fixer and a natural fungicide.
And how do you do this brew? Tim, how do you make this brew?
It's a very simple way. It's just an IBC cut open. I've got an air pump in there, so because air, getting that water oxygenated is vitally important, and making sure you haven't got any dead zones within the brew. And then it's just having a food source there, as in a molasses, a sugar source, and it's just literally brewing up to 24 hours. It's a very simple process. And then, you know, I advise everybody to get a microscope and just have a look and see what that brew's done, because then you can see how it's multiplied, and the more you use the microscope, the more you'll get used to it. But it's just quantifying. I like to quantify everything I'm doing, that it's actually worked, it's worth doing, and it's worth the money. Even if it's £3 a hectare, it's still got to be quantified in my mind.
And then how's that applied? Is that just simply put through the sprayer when you apply, go out into the field?
I've got two ways of applying. So I've got a liquid applicator on the drill, which we've developed. I've
Right.
worked with a guy called Trevor Tapping over the years, and we've now got a peristaltic pump on there, which means every coulter on the drill has got its own pump, and it's just like a kidney dialysis machine. So it's a very gentle squeezing action, so it doesn't damage the biology. And it also allows me to pump a really dirty liquid, because as I've got better at brewing, I've got that much biofilm there, which is basically I've brewed up loads of biology that I couldn't put it through a diaphragm system because it just blocked everything up. Whereas with the peristaltic pump, I can get all that liquid down there, which is what I wanted, what I was brewing up, and put it right next to the seed as a seed drench, right from day one. So it connects with the seed and it's in that rhizosphere, and we're getting that symbiosis, that connection right from day one. Then I'll follow that on by using just a normal sprayer at a high application rate, 200 litres a hectare minimum of volume. And I can spray the same sort of stuff on to keep that protection going throughout the growing season. So if I've got some brown rust coming in, Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus amyloxyphacium works superbly well at controlling brown rust. It also works superbly well on fusarium. It works better than any chemical on the market. And there's plenty of papers out there to prove that. That's just not me saying it. There are a lot of papers to prove that. It's
right. Well, and that's another thing here, Tim. I mean, you've obviously accumulated a lot of knowledge about these various bacteria and other microbes. How do you acquire that knowledge? Is it a question of experimenting and finding out what works? Are there places we can go where we?
I read an awful lot,
right?
So I've got way over 100, probably 150, 200 books on different subjects of soil and biology, and I'm the type of person, if I do something, I want to know everything about it, and I've probably bitten off more than I can chew this time, because I don't think I'll ever know everything about soil and what can happen, because there's so much we've got to learn, so much.
And how do you know what works and what doesn't work? I mean, I imagine that you've sort of adapted your brew over the years.
Everything is done by trial. So if I find a new thing, I'll do a small area. If it works, I'll do a larger area. If it doesn't work, I'll do a smaller area. I don't give up on it just because it didn't work in one particular year. It's everything needs at least 3 to 5 years if you're going to try something new, because it's just like trying a new crop. If you've got to give it the time to get to know it and get to know its boundaries and what it can achieve and what it can't achieve. And you're always dealing with different weather conditions and different moisture levels and different temperature levels. So it's just learning what's best. It's the same. I do an awful lot of my applications at night now because I don't want the UVs on my biology. Bacillus subtilis is quite UV tolerant, but others aren't. And you've just got to get out. At night, it's cool. The phone stops ringing and I can actually enjoy spraying and enjoy doing the job again. And it's very peaceful, I find it. So I only get calls from abroad then. It's quite good.
Fantastic. No, that's brilliant. Well, there's one other aspect that I'm really keen to talk to you about, and that's the Green Farm Collective that I know that you're one of the founder members of. So just tell me, first of all, how you got into the Green Farm Collective, how it started.
We're all ex-winners or ex-runners up in the Soil Farmer of the Year, and everybody were friends of mine, so it just seemed a good idea to bring us all together. And we really, our aim has always been to be farmers for farmers. So we do sell carbon, we do sell biodiversity, and now we're moving into the era of selling regenerative assured products that we're actually selling our wheat as a genuine regen product, because the subject is very wishy-washy about what is regen. So we've had our own audit done now that we can prove our farmers that grow under our name are producing a regen product. And it's just getting that story out there now that the consumer can start and understand the way we produce food. They're not only getting nutrient-rich food, but they're also playing their part in healing the planet in which we live. Because, a lot of farmers will say, oh, we've got to feed a growing population. Well, yeah, it's no point feeding a population if we're not going to have a planet for them to live in. We've got to start and respect this wonderful place we've been given to live. And we can't ignore the fact anymore that we can produce the same amount of food by growing in a different techniques and strategies to get the same results, but we're healing that planet. And that's Green Farm Collective's motive, is one, to help other farmers on that learning curve, but also provide that nutrient-rich food to the end consumer, that they can play their part in it, and we get a reward, but not as massive. I don't want I don't want the regen products to be high-end products. I want it to be available to the masses, that everybody should have the right to nutrient-rich food, that they can provide their own bodies with the nutrition they need, so they're not going to get ill. Because, you can see how human health is declining at the moment. There's 1 in 2 now, is it, get chances of getting cancer and all the dementia and everything. Well, we never had that when I was growing up. It was very rare to see people. And to me, as synthetic use has gone up in farming and in other industries, human health has gone down, and I want to start and turn that balance. And that's what Green Farm Collective is all about, is providing a cleaner, richer planet for everybody to live in and eat nutrient-rich food. And that's got to be every grower's motive, really, when you break it down.
Well, let me just look at that in a little bit more detail. I mean, one of the main things that you picked up there was carbon, and it's a huge topic of conversation at the moment. Carbon, isn't it? On the one hand, we're sort of being beaten around the head to a certain extent, saying you've got to reduce your carbon emissions and so on and so forth. On the other hand, there is this opportunity for farmers, and especially arable farmers, to sequester carbon. But the big question mark we all have is, how do we actually know how much carbon we've got? How do we know how we can do that great thing about sequestering carbon into our soils and things? So now, are you actually selling your carbon then, Tim?
We are, yeah. We use a platform called Sandy, which is part of Trinity AgTech, which we believe is the most accurate in the world.
Yep.
Because it does take everything into account. And your footprint, to me as a farmer, has to be taken into account. You can't just ignore it. Everything we use on farm is part of that production line to grow that food. So it's got to be accountable for, be it our fertiliser, our diesel. Everything has got to be accountable for. Now, it might be the diesel producer is taking care of their own footprint and we don't have to offset it. But at the moment, in my opinion, Tom, we're the end user of it, so we've got to be accountable for it. So somebody's got to be accountable. So at the moment, we've got to be accountable. So with Sandy, all that footprint is taken into account, and then what we've got left with, we can trade, but we still hold a little bit back just to make sure we're safe, that we're not overselling what we haven't got. But yes, we have traded carbon, so we have started to do it. We have put it out there.
That must be quite. You must have confidence in the system you're using, Tim, to be able to trade the carbon.
I've got complete confidence,
because as I understand it,
it doesn't give us masses and masses of carbon. It's very accurate, because you've always got to remember, when carbon and you've got a biological soil, that carbon cycle kicks into gear. So the more carbon I'm getting in, the more biology that's cycling that carbon all the while. So it's always an ongoing process, and you do have to be accountable for that. So it's you're never going to be able to say hand on heart how much carbon you've got, because it's constantly being cycled, and that's where Sandy is the one platform I found that is the most accurate, that gives me confidence that I can sell, but I can also sleep at night. And that is the key to it all, is being able to sleep at night, knowing that what you've done is to the best of the information we've got available to us, that nobody's going to come knocking on the door and say, sorry, Mr. Parton, but you didn't have that carbon to sell us, so we want our money back. Well, Sandy is accredited. We know it's what we do sell is safe, and we can sleep at night. And that has got to be what it's all about. I wouldn't want any farmer in 5 years' time thinking, bloody hell, I made the wrong decision coming to you, because I've now got a big claim against me that I didn't have that carbon. And Sandy has given us the opportunity to be able to do that and be able to sleep at night, basically. And that's what it's all about in my mind. It's being transparent that what we are doing is exactly what it says on the tin.
Brilliant. So now the other aspect that you highlighted there was biodiversity as well. And it's one thing measuring your carbon, Tim, but measuring your biodiversity as well. I mean, we can all see it when we go out onto our farms and so on, and we can hear the birds tweeting, and we can see the insects buzzing around, and so on and so forth. See the wildflowers, but actually measuring it, being able to quantify it to the extent that you can then give it a value. How are you doing that?
Again, we can use Sandy for that, which has got the biodiversity calculator on there. So again, we can have a certificate to prove that we're actually doing what we say on the tin. But I think you highlighted it there, Tom. The beauty of biodiversity, you can actually see what you're paying for, which is a big difference to carbon. I sold some biodiversity to a flooring company in Birmingham, FLR, and they weren't interested in carbon.
Right.
They wanted the biodiversity that they could see. They've been out to the farm. We've done some promotional videos showing their customers how they're investing in me to grow wildflowers, because wildflowers are so important to our indigenous pollinators. They just don't recognise a lot of these modern flowers. And we had Charlotte Smith here because the Green Farm Collective won the Future Farming Award with the BBC Food and Farming Awards. And Charlotte Smith,
yes, of course, congratulations.
Thank you. As a beautiful bouquet, and that was the best description I can come up with. It was a beautiful bouquet, and you could see all the solitary bees. It was just buzzing. It was just buzzing with insect life, and that's what it's all about. The insects here now and the bird life we've got here on the back of all those insects are just going through the roof, and that's something that can be shouted about. You know, as a farmer, we see our biodiversity every day and we take it for granted. People living in the inner cities don't see that, and to see the good work that we're doing and they can play a part in that good work has got a value to it, and that's something we should be very proud of. That they can invest in that and be part of the
and that's part of what you're doing with the Green Farm Collective then. So it's not just about measuring it and saying, we have definitely got these valuable resources and selling them and so on, but also welcoming your customers directly onto the farm and saying, look, here it is. Is that an important part of it then, Tim?
It really is an important part.
Right, I see.
You can go on and at our open day, we were selling biodiversity that people could come in, buy a 3 by 3 metre square of biodiversity and be part of that journey and invest in it.
I see.
And when I do talks for the local villages and things like that, they all want to, not all, but a big majority want to buy a part of that biodiversity. And that's the way of us sharing our farms, sharing that journey with our end consumer, because a lot of them aren't aware of the good work that we can do as farmers. And we've been kicked and battered for the last 30 odd years. Well, now it's time to stand up and be proud, because to me, farmers are the heroes of the world. There's nobody else can do what we do, as in providing food and healing the planet along the way. And it's something we should all be proud of, and be proud to sell that story and tell that story.
Well, that's really interesting to hear you say that, Tim. I mean, I imagine you must get an awful, a lot of reward from doing this work. And how can other farmers get involved in it?
Well, I do get an awful lot of reward. I mean, I always, when I'm crop walking, to see skylarks going up everywhere, to see that insect life and still be a profitable farm and see that ecosystem all working on farm, it's just a brilliant, warm feeling. And you can't help but smile, and you can't put a price on that feeling, that knowing what you're doing is right. And that is a priceless feeling in my mind. And people can apply to join Green Farm Collective as long as your part can meet the criteria of being a Green Farm Collective, which is all on the application form through our website. Right. Come and join us, and say, we can offer the whole service where we will sell produce, we'll sell biodiversity, and we'll sell carbon. So come and join us and be part of the journey with us.
Do you have people coming to you at the Green Farm Collective asking, prospective customers asking for farmers who are doing great things for carbon and biodiversity? Yeah.
We've had some exactly for that, Tom, that have come along. They just want to be part. They want to know more about it. I think people are still very cautious about the carbon biodiversity market, and I think a lot of people are just standing back, watching to see what happens and to see how we get on and whether it's a success. It certainly had an effect with the downturn in our economy of people wanting to invest in carbon and biodiversity, but the market's still there. And I think that's where we can have our head above the parapet, because we're offering, a guaranteed high quality carbon, which is a big difference to a lot of the carbon that's on the market. And our biodiversity is obviously, the proof's in the pudding. You can actually see it, which is just brilliant to see.
No, well, that's great. That's really interesting. And that's such a good message as well. And I just want to sort of have a look at where this is all going, Tim, or where you think it's going. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier on was the nutrition value of our food and so on. And so, I mean, do you think that is really the case, that if we are growing the food in a better system, in a better biological system, if you like, then we will have more nutritious food as a result?
Oh, 100%, Tom. There's a great variation. I've got a bio nutrition meter, which is part of the Bio Association with Dan Kittredge. And they've done an awful lot of work, and other organisations, there's Griffin in this country that have done an awful lot of work measuring different carrots and seeing different carrots, and the variation is huge. You can have lots and lots of carrots that only equal one carrot in a nutrition basis, and there's been a fair bit of work done on carrots, which is why I'm using carrots. But it certainly is, and once you've got, it makes perfect sense to me that once you've got all that fungal community in the soil talking and working with that plant, it's going to be more nutrient rich. And I use the word nutrient rich rather than nutrient dense, because dense to me is black, it's dark, it doesn't encourage it. Where nutrient rich, it's alive, it's life, and that's what the food should be, because it is a live, living thing that's then going to transport that to our bodies and make us a nutrient rich being that's really making use of all that nutrition to keep us healthy and keep us active. And that is what I do is all about, is providing that nutrient-rich food, because most illnesses all come down to nutrition, and we just haven't focused on it. Our medical system uses an awful lot of drugs, the same as our farming system uses an awful lot of chemicals to keep things happy, which to me is just a sticky plaster. It's not actually looking at the root cause of why we've got ill, and it's the same with our plants. We haven't looked at that root cause of why that plant has got ill. We've just put that sticky plaster on of a quick fix with a fungicide, which is exactly the same with a lot of the drugs that we've used in our medical industry. And I'm no doctor, but that's just my observation and my opinion. But it's exactly the same thing. And we've got to get down to that root cause, which a lot of people are starting to do now, and actually see what we are lacking in our bodies. My journey started, I had a bout of anxiety, depression. My wife worked in the mental health industry at the time, and she just didn't want me to go on to drugs. And I'm not advising anybody not to take drugs or anything. I'm not qualified to do that. But for me, I got myself tested just like I do with my plants, and I balanced my own body up with nutrition. And I had some counselling as well, but I got better. And a lot of that was down to the nutrition, which was the light bulb moment for me of getting more interested in nutrition, which is where I started to transport that onto farm and getting my plants nutritionally balanced, that they won't get ill. And that's how I've managed to step away from insecticides and fungicides and growth regulators. It's all down to the nutrition and keeping that plant balanced.
That's fascinating, Tim, and thank you very much for sharing that. And it's great to hear that you're getting personal value out of the work that you're doing, as well as business benefit as well. And that's really good to hear. I mean, one thing, we've talked for about 40 minutes now about soil biology. Well, it's not just soil biology; it's all the biology to do with the plant and the food and everything. And now I'm going to tell you about a project that we've got that we're about to start in January, which is called Truth. This is Thriving Roots Underpinning Total Soil Health is the project. So this is a new project that BOFIN is leading. We've got a few other partners as well within this project. One of the main things that we're looking at is the soil. It's all about the soil, and it's about the interaction between the roots and the soil. And we're looking in detail at the biology there. And we're one of the main things that we're doing is we've got a sensor. I don't know if you've come across PEZ Technologies with their sensor. So it's like a soil nose. It's fascinating. You've heard about it. Yeah. So it's so what you do is you take a little bit of soil and you put it in this chamber, and it smells it basically. So it cooks the soil a little bit, and the volatiles come off, and it can tell from those volatiles what's in the soil. And so we're going to be training this sensor and sort of clarifying the results, if you like. We're also working with the University of Nottingham. And we're working with John Innes Centre. We've got some really interesting work that they've been doing with wheats and some of these old wheats, some of these unusual wheats, looking at the root architecture. And we want to look very closely between the root architecture and the soil. So the idea of Truth is it's going to be a farmer-led platform that's going to be investigating this and putting a lot more science on it, but putting a lot of the knowledge into farmers' hands around it. So I'm really, really excited about this project, Tim, and I sincerely hope that you'll be you'd like to join it.
Yes, definitely. Sounds interesting.
Well, look out for it. It's going to be coming up in January. It's a 3-year project. Look out for more details on that. And anyone else who's listening, do look out for that. If you want to find out more, go to bofin.org.uk. And if you haven't already joined, please do join BOFIN, and then we'll keep you updated with all of our news. But look, listen, this is all we've got time for. We could probably carry on all day, couldn't we, Tim? Because this is such a fascinating topic, and there is so much to understand about it. But thank you very, very much for joining us, Tim. Are there any sort of final thoughts before we sign off?
Oh gosh, anybody that's starting off on the journey, I always advise everybody just fill a jam jar full of soil, put it on the shelf, and then compare in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, and just see how that soil colour has changed. Because everybody's guilty of it. They start off, and because you're looking at your soil all constantly, all the while, you don't see the big changes. Whereas if you put a jam jar and actually compare in a few years' time, you'll be amazed how your soil colour has changed and how things have moved forward.
Fantastic. No, what a brilliant idea. In fact, I might do that. I might just go and grab a jam jar, save some soil at the moment. I have to say, by the way, going back to those results I was saying earlier, so we had 41 results. And as I say, they ranged from 5% AMF up to nearly 70%. I was number 36, I'm ashamed to say. So I'm obviously right at the start of my soil journey. I've got a long way to go. So maybe I should do that. Go out now, get a jam jar, and then have a look at it in 5 years' time and see where I've got to. But look, Tim, thank you so much for that journey through what you've been doing at Brewood Park Farm, through your quest to find out more about soil biology and food biology and how to get value from that. That's been a really fascinating journey. Do look out for more from the BOFIN Buzz, everybody. We will be coming back with another episode shortly. So do keep a lookout for more from us. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.